Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, scholars and writers, distinguished guests, a warm welcome to each and every one of you to the AFIS Academic Writing Workshop with the theme, Getting Published in International Academic Journal, sponsored by Henry Luce Foundation, a workshop designed to enhance the capacity of Indonesian scholars to submit manuscripts focusing on Indonesian studies and publish in English language journals. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jane, and I'm honored to stand before you as your Master of Ceremony and moderator, ready to guide you through this transformative experience. Throughout the day, we have a series of engaging and informative sessions planned for you. Please take this opportunity to ask questions and share your insights. Before we commence our online academic writing workshop, let's go through some important housekeeping guidelines to ensure a smooth and productive experience for everyone participating from the comfort of their own screens. Active participation is encouraged throughout the workshop. Feel free to ask questions, provide insights, and engage in discussions. Please keep your microphones muted when you are not speaking to minimize background noise and ensure a clear audio experience for everyone. We kindly request that you silence your mobile devices to maintain an atmosphere of uninterrupted learning and focus. Please ensure that your speakers or headphones are working properly to hear the audio clearly. During interactive sessions or breakout rooms, please use the raise hand feature or type your questions in the chat box to indicate that you would like to speak or ask a question. Utilize the chat box for sending a question, sharing relevant resources or links, and connecting with fellow participants. If you encounter any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to our team. Please note that this workshop may be recorded for future reference or for those unable to attend. By participating in this online event, you are agreeing to the possibility of being recorded. If you do not wish to appear or be heard, please disable your camera and microphone. Before we begin our insightful sessions, please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Megan Hewitt, the Executive Director of AFIS, as she delivers her opening remarks. Dr. Hewitt, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It's really a privilege to have you all be here with us today and to have Paul Krakowska coming to speak with us about the academic writing and publishing process. I wanted to just share some very brief remarks so that we can jump more into the meat of our dinner tonight. It's evening here in the US, so I might be a little bit hungry. I know it's early in Indonesia, but forgive me for the dinner puns. But I wanted to share a little bit just about, this is our 8th version of the academic writing workshop. And we are trying a little bit of a different format this time, in that we have formatted it in a kind of short course with a couple of meetings, 3 meetings over 3 weeks, interspersed with these Q&A sessions with our speakers. And in this way, we hope to be able to bring you some of the phenomenal materials that have already been produced by Paul Krakowska, Susan and Paul Nearney, as well as AFIS's own Siddharth Chandra and other consortium members, to use some of those materials and see if we could breathe some new life in them, bring a new group of people into conversation with them, and see what kinds of new directions in our conversations around academic writing we can cultivate together. So I hope that this is a productive format and a new format for us to engage in together. So we do also are grateful for your patience as we model a new format as well. This being our 8th academic writing workshop, over the course of just about 4 years, we are very proud to share that there have been upwards of 50 plus published manuscripts from previous academic writing workshop participants. We're very proud of that figure because that's 50 more articles by Indonesian scholars available across a variety of disciplines than there were just 4 years ago. So we're really excited to be able to help increase that number, increase the number of publications that all of you are able to accomplish. And just really thank you for joining us in this dialogue tonight. this morning for everyone else. Thank you all. I'll leave that for my introductory remarks so we can jump right into conversation with Paul. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid, for the opening remarks. Before we dive into the exciting sessions planned for today, let's take a moment to recognize the importance of effective academic writing. Writing is a fundamental tool for communication and a key element of success in the academic world. Today, we gather to equip ourselves with the knowledge and techniques necessary to master this skill. We are privileged to have distinguished experts in the field of academic writing with us today. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Paul Krakowska. Dr. Paul Krakowska was formerly the managing director of NUS Press at the National University of Singapore. He is past editor of the Journal of Southeast Asian Studies and current editor of the Journal of the Malaysian branch of the Royal Asiatic Society. Before going into academic publishing, he taught in the Philippines, Malaysia, and at the National University of Singapore. He serves on the boards of several journals and is lead mentor for the Social Science Research Council's Global Scholars Initiative. His presence and expertise will undoubtedly enrich our learning experience. Now, without further ado, let's dive into our session. It's time for our question and answer session, where you get the chance to engage directly with Dr. Paul Krakowska. So let's open the floor to your burning questions and embark on a dynamic discussion that will further enrich our understanding of academic writing. Feel free to write your questions on the chat box. And while we're waiting for questions to come into the chat box, please join me in giving a warm round of applause to welcome Dr. Paul Krakowska. Dr. Krakowska, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. This is primarily going to be a session where I try to answer your questions, but I've been asked to make a few preliminary remarks. The recordings that you've already seen contain a lot of basic information. Academic publishing, though, is changing quite rapidly, and I don't think there's anything in the recordings that's completely out of date. But I think it's worthwhile talking about two developments that are currently taking place. And one is the pressure for people to publish in open access journals. This is primarily something that's affecting academics in Western Europe and North America, but it's going to have an impact on academic publishing throughout the world. And the other, which is even more recent, is the role of artificial intelligence in writing and, I guess, potentially editing manuscripts. So I'm not going to say a lot, partly because both of these topics are still works in progress, and nobody really has final answers as to where it's all leading us. Open access initiatives have been around for a decade or so. And they're initially a response to the very high prices that are charged by commercial academic presses for journals. The big push for them now has to do with funding agencies requesting that anybody who receives funds from a lot of the Western funding agencies must publish their results open access. In other words, not behind paywalls. This is something that is very appealing to the reader, but it's a little bit of a problem for a publisher because there are expenses even for putting out an open access journal. And so the question is, how are those expenses going to be covered? The idea, which is, I guess, still being pushed in the West, is that universities or funding agencies or governments should be able to supply this money, and particularly if the universities were to stop paying very high fees for the journals that they subscribe to and divert that money to cover open access publishing. The theory is that that would completely cover the cost, but it would make material available to everybody. The problem with that is the transition, because universities right now are every year paying out these large sums of money, and they are not going to stop immediately and transfer this to open access. So this is something that is being worked out in the Western universities. The problem then for people in Asia is how would they be able to pay the article processing charges that are associated with open access? And at the moment, I don't think there's any answer to that. So I'll stop that topic with that comment. Artificial intelligence has just burst on the scene in the past few months. And I'm pretty sure everybody has read something about this, about how you could effectively write an article to just tell the open access program, okay, this is my topic, this is the kind of thing I want to say, write the article. It's a matter of considerable concern to journal editors because they don't want to be publishing articles that are written by machines instead of by people. It's a problem too because clever as the artificial intelligence is, you have to remember that it's trained on existing text. And what that means is that it's not really a system that's going to be able to come up with new ideas. It will just reprocess existing ideas. Where it could be useful, though, particularly for somebody who's writing in English as a second language or who's translating an article, potentially you could use artificial intelligence to do a translation, so a machine translation, and then edit that translation, again using artificial intelligence to smooth out the language. So this would be a potential use, which could be quite valuable for people who are not able to write with complete comfort in English, but want to publish in English language journals. So again, all I can say about this is that it's kind of a work in progress, and it's obviously going to become something that you'll have to pay attention to in the future. So with that, I think we're ready to move on to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. It appears that we have received our first question from the chat box from Lydia. How to indicate a journal is good or not? I mean, how to know a journal is predatory journal or not? Because when I search in the internet, the information is only about the publishers, and we know that a publisher usually has many journals.
Well, some of the publishers that have many journals are predatory. There was a new publisher a few years ago, and they immediately launched 99 journals. There's no surefire way of knowing, but there are some clues, and I think they were included in some of the recordings I made. But the starting point is that the journals that are in the standard citation indexes are going to be reliable. Then it's better if I'm not going to be able to remember all these off the top of my head. So if you want, I can put together a handout with some suggestions about how to identify predatory journals. I think it's better if we do it that way.
Sure, Paul, I can jump in just a little. We can also find that video from our past workshops where you had discussed predatory journals as well. But that'd be wonderful to have a handout from you.
Well, one thing that the original list that was identifying predatory journals was called Beales List, BEAL''S. Now, Beales List was shut down for a while because some of these predatory publishers started suing him for defamation because he said that they were cheats. They were cheats, but that's you have to prove this in court. So it was shut down. It's been restarted. And so if you go to just look up Beales List, again, BEAL''S, you'll find information there. Also, you want to be very suspicious if a journal is too eager to publish you. We'll publish you within 6 weeks. We'll publish your article and just about anything else you care to send us. Just send it along. Most legitimate journals are not going to do that. I mean, they may say we would welcome additional submissions. That's fine. And finally, there's the question of money, because these predatory journals exist to collect money. And what you often get, with any journal these days, you're going to get some kind of a document that you have to sign giving approval to publish your material. The predatory journals usually have very, very long, detailed documents, but somewhere in there, there's something about how much money you have to pay. And what you have to watch out for with these, they actually amount to contracts. And if you sign that, then you owe that money to whoever sent the contract. So it's not wrong for a journal to charge something, because these open access fees have to be paid somehow. And sometimes legitimate journals will charge quite a lot. So the fact that a journal is asking for payment doesn't tell you very much. You have to use some other techniques to figure that out.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. While we're waiting, oh, there's Jeffrey Ali Saiful who wants to speak, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because like I will, if I write it down, like it will have a long list of words. So it's better for me like to speak my mind out. Well, thank you so much for the time and for the recording. So I just happened to watch all the recordings yesterday because I also in Taiwan right now for my PhD educations. I have two questions actually. The first one is related to the language. As an English writing style, it must be very direct and provocations language, right? And then I try, because my background is from critical education, meaning critical pedagogy. So I use like kind of critical languages terms such as that have been used massively for the critical theory kind of words. So it like to provoke such discussions. But when it comes to like I put it in my manuscript, and then I happen to have kind of rejections one time, and then the comment of the rejection is that your words is too too fluffy. I mean like is too way before it's too critical. It's too critical. It's too critical. And in the language of academic research, it should be neutral. So my question would be, how neutral should be the language in our paper, and how far we could reach the degree of provocations to invite criticism or to have discussions within our literature review and so on. That's the first questions. The second questions would be, I'm experiencing being rejected by 5 journals, and then this article has been like 2 years, and mostly of the rejected is desk rejection. So I watched your video about desk rejection, right? And the comment from the editors is like, because it is not matched with our scope, but we have already waited like 3 months, 9 months already. If you are pregnant, it's already have delivery 9 months, and then directly like, oh my God, your is not in my scope. Why don't you just say it at the beginning, so I don't need to wait like 9 months having a baby for that, right? So in short, because the nature of my study is transdisciplinary, where I incorporate 3 disciplines. So might be that editors could not understand which I stand within disciplines using my transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary research in one work. Then my question would be, where should I stand? If I create a work where combine field such as Indonesian studies and then language studies and then also environmental studies into one work, because like, yeah, you know what I mean, right? So how should I frame my work so that and then where should I go to what kind of journal or editors, journal that can accommodate my transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary study? Thank you.
In a way, those questions are related. because they both have to do with the selection of the journal. And we talk a lot about cross-disciplinary work, not getting locked into a single discipline. But I think the fundamental point, the starting point for what you're asking is, who are you writing this for? And then who reads the journal? And if you go to a journal that is specifically about linguistics, then that's the primary audience. And if you're doing something that's talking about psychology and linguistics together, if the linguistics audience is not going to be interested in the psychology part, you might get rejected for that. So your problem is to start with the audience, figure out who you're writing for. Second point about journals is that some journals have a very narrow focus, and the people who read that journal will have that same narrow focus. Some journals are broader. So the Journal of Southeast Asian Studies, we had people looking at the journal who specialized in the countries across the region, and they also had different disciplinary focus. So the idea there was that we wanted everybody to be interested in the articles, and that meant that something that was too technical, let's say you're talking about Buddhist texts, and so you look very deeply into the language or the philosophy that's represented in a Buddhist text. Probably that Journal of Southeast Asian Studies is not the right place for that. There are journals that specialize precisely in that sort of thing, and that would be what you'd be looking for. The idea, though, is that editors want to serve the audience that reads their journal, but they also want to broaden it as much as possible. The fundamental issue for an editor is that you're using up space in the journal. And if nobody reads it, then you've taken that space away from somebody else, and you don't want to be doing that. Jargon is a problem. And it's pretty much the same issue, though, that there are people in your field who will understand what you're saying if you use a lot of technical terms. But that's only going to work if you send it to a journal that is specialized in that field. Now, when you're talking about cross-disciplinary things, it's really hard to find a journal that's specialized in precisely the kind of cross-disciplinary work that you do. And if you find that, they'll probably take it. If you don't find that, then you could easily get rejected by everybody. And that seems like what's happening to you. So you may want to, commendable as it is to be trying to do things that are cross-disciplinary, bringing in ideas from the different disciplines, you might really need to say, okay, this is fundamentally an article in this discipline. And yes, I'll talk a little bit about comments from other disciplines, but what I'm going to write for is an audience in this discipline. And I think that might improve your chances. The waiting time, I think, is too long, but what you do need to understand is a lot of journal editors are volunteers, and they are also teaching and doing other things. And this happens. They get a lot of articles, and they may look at something and they say, well, yes, this is kind of interesting. Maybe we'll want to do it. Okay, the next step is they've got to find referees. And it's getting harder and harder to get people to referee articles. You write to people that seem like exactly the right person. Sometimes they don't answer. Sometimes they answer and say, okay, I can do this, but it'll take me 3 months, and 3 months pass and they don't do it. And then you start having to send them reminders. And of course, editors have no leverage over the referees. Referees are not paid. It's all volunteer. So all you can do as an editor is you send a reminder, and eventually you say, well, the person who wrote this needs this article for that person's career. And so you're hurting somebody else, but you don't want to be too blunt about that either. So there's not much I can say, except that if you're kept waiting more than seems reasonable, and let's say 3 months, it's certainly fine to send a reminder, just very, very polite, very nice, to the editor, and ask if there's any progress. 9 months really is too much. And so at some point, you've worked hard to figure out which journal you want to go to. You've gone to it and they kept you waiting 9 months. So then you have to make a decision. You can withdraw and try it again, or you can keep your fingers crossed and hope something finally does happen. It's not good. Critical writing, I guess, is the last point. And there are two ways you can tackle doing something critical. And one is that you go head on and you say, okay, this person says this, and I think it's wrong, or I disagree. Alternatively, you can not be quite so direct. You simply say, this is what other people have said, this, and this, and this is my take on it, and you present it, but you're not really being confrontational. Nothing wrong really with either one, but I will share one little bit of advice that I got when I was a first-year graduate student. We were all charging into academics with the idea that we were going to be revisionist. We were going to change the way people viewed the world, change scholarship. And some of my classmates did. But the advice we got in the first year was, by all means, the people who you're talking about, the senior scholars in the field, are not perfect. They've made mistakes. There's all sorts of things you can criticize, but they're not stupid either. And so you need to be on very solid ground when you're challenging other people. And sometimes the smartest thing is that you simply put up your idea and let it have a life of its own rather than being confrontational about it. But there's certainly no need to completely avoid this. The whole thing that happens in academic writing, it's a conversation. And it's a conversation in which people disagree with each other. And sometimes very forcefully. Just don't charge in unless you are really able, in terms of your own research, in terms of your grasp of the theory. If you're really able to defend a position against somebody else, then yeah, that's part of what academic writing is about.
Thank you,
Okay,
Dr.
so much for
Krakowska.
the insights. Yeah.
I think we have limited time, and then we shall go to the next question. It's from Ashri Saraswati. In determining the academic journal to target, would you recommend early career scholars to target key 1 until key 3 journals, or journals in professional associations or other English language journals that might not be key 1 until key 3? How important is it in the international academic world to publish in journals indexed in Scopus?
I think you want to get published. That's the first thing. And so you need to be a bit selective in sending your material off because, as we just heard, it could well be that it's going to take a while before you get an answer. And so if you wait 6 months, you send an article, 6 months pass, and it's rejected, and then you send it somewhere else, another 6 months passes. You can spend half your career waiting to get an article published that way. And if you send it off to a journal with a very high rejection rate, then the chances are pretty good that it won't get accepted, not because it's bad, but because they have better journals, better articles, or they have articles that are more what they're looking for at a particular point in time. So looking at journals that are a bit more specialized is probably the best way to get yourself published. Secondly, then this question about the rankings and whether it's important to be in a Scopus journal or not really depends on where you're working or where you're hoping to work. But these days in Southeast Asia, I think most of the premier universities expect at a minimum that you publish in a Scopus journal. And Scopus is expanding. If you look at the number of journals in Scopus, it's increased a lot. So it's easier and easier to find a journal that is a Scopus publication. In East Asia, Scopus isn't really enough. They're really looking for the Web of Science journals. And do bear in mind, though, that it's not just in Asia that these pressures are taking place, that pretty much all around the world, people are competing for places in the same journals. So the competition is fierce. And top journals, I'm going to take the Journal of Asian Studies, and the rejection rate for a journal like that is over 90%. Now, if you're lucky, you send an article in, they'll look at it quickly and say, nope, not for us. And so within a week, you'll get told no. And when we've done these workshops, we often start off by saying to people, have you submitted articles? And then what happened? And very often the answer is exactly that. I sent it in and 5 days later I was rejected. And okay, you don't like to be rejected, but be grateful if you get rejected in 5 days, because that tells you something. You won't have a referee's report, but you'll have some idea that the journal you picked wasn't the right place. And then you go back and try to find something that's better suited to what you've done.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. The next question is from Muntaza. How the pressure of open access is significant for readers when we already have Sci-Hub?
You have Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub is illegal. You shouldn't use it. I don't think I better say any more.
Okay. The next question from Dr. Megan Hewitt. You mentioned that quick publication can be a possible sign of a predatory journal. What is a typical timeline for the process of journal publication?
Okay. Actually, let me say one more thing about Sci-Hub. It's very damaging to all the other journals. Yes, they have a lot of stuff up on it. It's easy to get it. But if other journals that are actually producing this material have it all pirated, eventually they're going to collapse and you'll have nothing but Sci-Hub, and that's not going to work at all. The timeline for publication. Okay, first of all, journals come out at different intervals. The Malaysian branch journal comes out every 6 months. Some journals are quarterly. I think Modern Asian Studies now is every 2 months. So it will depend on how many articles per year a journal needs, how fast they're going to get it in print. It also depends how many articles they have waiting. Some journals now will tell you with the article, they'll say the manuscript was received on this date and it was published on this date. And that will give you an indication of how long you might expect to wait. I would think, though, that, realistically, you send an article in, probably takes 2 to 3 weeks for the preliminary processing. And that's going to be a screening where somebody says, yes, this could be for us, or no, it's hopeless and we aren't going to do anything with it. Then after that, you look for a referee. And if you're lucky, you find referees right away. And a lot of journals will do 2 referees. Some, I think the Journal of the American Historical Association uses 4 or 5 referees for each article. And you have to give the referees time to read the piece. And of course, they're busy doing other things. So you say, all right, you have 1 month or 1.5 months. And then, as I said, after that time passes, then you have to chase them because they haven't actually produced the report. So let's say 2 months at least for the referees' reports. Once the reports are in, then you'll hear back from the journal and they'll say, well, we have these suggestions. It's almost unheard of to get a complete acceptance without some revisions. And you should bear in mind that if you get a revise and resubmit, this is a very, very good outcome. It means that they're interested in the article. People tend to look at it as almost like a rejection, and that is a big mistake. Okay, so then you'll probably get a suggestion from the editor saying, here these points that we think are really important. You have to fix these things. And then the referees have also raised these other points optional. You can do something with them or not. They're just there for you to think about. And so that depends how long it takes you. But to do a good job of revision, I would think would be at least probably a month. Okay, then it comes back in. Somebody's got to copy edit it, at least minimally, to check the language, make sure that everything is reading well. And then you go into the queue for publication. And again, that's very hard to know, but probably most journals will be at least 1 or 2 issues ahead. So you might have to wait. Well, depends how often the journal comes out. And you might get lucky. And at that point that your article is cleared for publication, it could be that they don't have a long waiting list, in which case you get published quickly. I think basically within a year would be quite reasonable. And at the very least, the editor should tell you at some point along the way, okay, this is the situation, and you should expect to wait this long.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. The next question comes from Bernardus and Elizabeth. I think it's a similar. What is note to editor and how important is it for an article submissions? And then is a note to editor different from a letter to the editor or a cover letter?
If you're writing to a journal that has an automated submission system, you don't need to send anything to the editor. You just upload your article and you fill in the blanks and it will be put into processing. Somewhere along the way, the editor will review this, but they'll be reviewing it on the basis of what you have in the article, not any kind of a letter to the editor. In terms of writing an editor, most editors do not want to have somebody write them and say, I'm working on this topic. Would that be suitable for your journal? You need to figure that out on your own. And you do that by looking at past issues of the journal, see what they published, see if there's any kind of emphasis. So, for example, a journal might have a lot of statistics, or it might have very few statistics. So if your piece is heavy on statistics, a journal that doesn't do much with that probably won't be the right place to go. Other journals may be very strong on theory. And so if you're not doing, if you're primarily talking about data, not very concerned with theory, then you think about that. So a lot of this has to do with picking a journal on that basis. I don't know if that covers what you asked, but I think that's enough.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. The next question from Ika Nurhayani. Many open access journals, even the ones seemingly reputable, require authors to pay. How do we decide which ones of them are the good ones?
You decide based on who publishes in the journal, who the publisher is, what kind of impact the journal is having, how many people are reading the articles. The fees for open access are becoming a big problem because I don't have the range in front of me, but a couple of years ago, if you were going to publish in a Cambridge University Press journal, the fee for open access these were hybrid journals, so they were behind a paywall. But if an author wanted, they could pay a fee, and then the article would be open access. And I think the price for doing that was around $2,700 US. Some journals now are charging up to $5,000, and maybe even more by now for open access. That is for making an article available as an open access article. At the other end of the scale, you might find a payment of around $500 to $1,000 US. I remember talking to somebody from the Philippines several years ago about this, and this guy said, "Look, I don't care if they're just charging us $10; it's too much for us." And this is the big problem with open access. There needs to be some way to cover the fees other than paying it out of the author's pocket. And this is, to me, it's a big problem for authors in Asia because there are systems being put in place in North America and Western Europe where somebody other than the author will pay the fee. But if that kind of thing is not available in Asia, and mostly it's not going to be, then how does an author in Asia publish an open access article? On the other side of this, if you look around Indonesia, there are about 9,000 journals being produced in Indonesia, and hundreds of them are open access. The problem really there is that they're not in the citation indexes. And so if your university expects you to publish in a citation index journal, then these Indonesian journals are going to be a problem. And the answer to that really seems to be that the journals that are open access in Indonesia need to find ways to make them legitimate in terms of international recognition. And this is something that it just about has to happen because the whole publishing arrangement that we have now doesn't seem sustainable. And the fact that you can publish in an Indonesian journal in English without paying an article processing charge, because these are subsidized, is a great advantage. So the question then becomes recognition of these Indonesian journals.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. The next question from Uchi Eli Kolida. I have experience from my partner in university. She was accepted in Q1 journal, but after she applied the funding reimbursement to the university, unfortunately, the result is stated that it was a fake Scopus journal. Is that the same ideas as the predator journals? Could you provide us with more info related to fake Scopus? I do sorry if I'm not well informed about this one since it's all new insight for me. Your answer probably enlightens me then.
Yeah, I think, again, we need to prepare a handout of some kind about this. I don't know how you definitively find out about whether a journal is fake or not. There's a director of open access publishers. And one way of checking is that you look at that directory and see if the publisher of the journal is in it. In principle, they screen everything, and a predatory publisher will not be included, but people slip through. So I mean, you'd have to understand why the university said that, and what their criteria was. And there's no standard list, so I really don't know.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. The next one from Resti Nurmala. How significant is the effect of the author's composition on the time of submitting the journal? What is the ideal number of authors in an international publication? Does the diversity of educational backgrounds also have an impact? For example, in a paper, the authors only consist of bachelor graduates or only one master without a PhD?
I'd like to say that the educational level of the authors doesn't matter, but if it's going to depend primarily on what the article says, how much of a contribution it is. But I'm afraid the fact is that if it's entirely just bachelor's degree holders, it may be a little harder. The bigger issue, though, that you've raised is how many authors on an article. And this is becoming a big problem because if you receive an article that's a short article, just 5 or 10 pages, and you have 10 authors, there is a real question as to who actually wrote the article. What people are doing these days is they may have a grant, and the grant may be awarded to a team of, it could be 10 people. And so every article that comes out of that grant, all 10 people get put on the article. Journals don't like this because the principle really should be that the person who actually wrote an article is the person who is identified as the author. And I can imagine two people collaborating on a shortish article, on any article, let's say, maybe even three. I cannot really imagine a team of people, 10 or 15 people, each making the same kind of contribution to the article. So when I get those things, sometimes I would just reject it out of hand and say, this is not really put together in the right way.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska. This will be the last question before we go to the breakout rooms. It's from Lydia. How is the editor hope from a manuscript? Is that about the amount of data, how many table and graph should be in a manuscript, or new methods used in the research? It will be difficult for people who live in developing country like Indonesia who do not have good equipment laboratory, or the topic itself.
Depends on the journal, and really you're not quite asking the right question there. You need to look at what a journal tries to accomplish. You need to think about what you're trying to accomplish as an author. And I suppose the starting point is that no matter how much data you've collected, you can't put all of it into an article. Your job as an author is to summarize data. And so you start off with several tables. Do you really need to put all those tables in? Because sometimes too much data makes it harder to understand what point you're trying to make. I think maybe just to sum up on this, there are three things that you do in an article. All articles start off with information. You collect facts, and you really can't write an article without that. But if you try to write an article and you don't do anything except say, here are the facts, that's going to be hard to get published too. So the second thing is explanation, where you explain the facts. And what I would suggest you think about, and I've said this in the presentation that we've recorded as well, but I think what you need to start with is how do you collect facts? Well, you ask questions, and the questions are almost entirely questions of who, what, when, and where. Okay, then you try to explain it. And when you explain it, you're asking two other questions, which are why did something happen? Why? And then the other one is how. And those are the analytical questions. And articles usually are built around the answers to analytical questions. And the answer to that's going to be an argument. The argument, you have an explanation, and then you use your data to support that explanation. But again, bear in mind, you cannot present every detail that you found. What you're trying to do is to summarize accurately. And the people who are reading what you've written have to trust that you're doing that you're not cheating, that you're not pretending certain pieces of data don't exist. And then the final thing that you want to be thinking about, so we've talked about, I mentioned information and explanation. The final thing is interpretation. Why does any of this matter? And one of the very common questions that came up over the years when I was in editorial meetings is, so what? People find information about all sorts of things. Some of it matters and some of it doesn't. And you really need to try and explain why the piece of information and the explanation that you're provided matters to anybody. Why is it significant? So I would say that the heart of this is the argument. In other words, your explanation. Then you have to support that, and that's where your data comes in. And then you need to tell an editor, why does this matter? If you've done those things and you have, if your article really does matter, you'll probably get it published.
Thank you, Dr. Krakowska, for sharing your knowledge. We are truly grateful. Unfortunately, our time for question and answer session has come to an end. Thank you all for your engaging questions and active participation during the question and answer session. We hope it has sparked new ideas and provided clarity on the topics discussed. Before we bring this YouTube live session to a close, let us take a moment to express our deepest gratitude. First and foremost, we extend our heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Paul Krakowska. Thank you for coming, and workshop facilitators for their time, expertise, and unwavering commitment to fostering excellence in academic writing. We would also like to thank each and every one of you, our dedicated participants. Your enthusiasm, engagement, and willingness to actively contribute to the discussions have been truly inspiring. It is through your collective energy and intellectual curiosity that this workshop has flourished. Furthermore, we would like to extend our gratitude to Henry Luce Foundation, whose support and dedication have played a crucial role in making this event possible. Their commitment to fostering academic excellence is truly commendable. Our academic writing workshop is not over yet. We'll be back next week with the same time and same day. We highly encourage you to mark your calendars, clear your schedules, and join us for these invaluable opportunities. Take the time to review your notes, explore the recommended resources, and prepare any questions or insights you may have for our future sessions. On behalf of the organizing team, we thank you once again for your active participation and look forward to seeing you next week for the continuation of our academic writing workshop. Now, it's time to further apply and explore these concepts in a more interactive setting. We will be transitioning into breakout rooms where you will have the opportunity to collaborate with fellow participants on practical exercises related to academic writing. In the breakout rooms, you can expect to engage in stimulating discussions, share insights, and work together to apply the knowledge gained. Allow me to introduce our facilitators, who are not only accomplished scholars in their respective fields, but have also been an integral part of our previous workshops. Their dedication to the art of academic writing and their commitment to helping fellow scholars excel in their written work is truly commendable. It is worth noting that their manuscripts have been published, underscoring their exceptional writing skills and their ability to effectively communicate their research findings. Through their published work, they have made significant contributions to the academic community, further enhancing their credibility as accomplished writers. We are indeed fortunate to have them back as facilitators for this workshop, ready to share their knowledge, provide guidance, and support our journey towards scholarly excellence. Please be prepared to join your assigned breakout room shortly, as our team will assist in organizing the groups. Remember, the breakout rooms are designed to provide a more intimate setting for collaborative learning. So embrace this opportunity to interact with your peers and enhance your academic writing skills. Please follow the instructions provided to ensure a smooth transition into the breakout rooms. Enjoy your engaging discussions, and we'll reconvene as a larger group once the breakout activity concludes. Now let's proceed with the breakout room session and immerse ourselves in the dynamic exchange of ideas and knowledge.
Jane, if before we go into our breakout rooms, if I might interrupt very briefly, excuse
Sure.
me. I was wondering if before we conclude our YouTube session, if we might invite Paul to give some concluding words for the Q&A session before we do jump into our small group. Paul, was there anything finally concluding that you would like to share with the group?
Well, probably nothing very constructive, but I would like to say that we've done these workshops now for close to a decade. And I think the main conclusion that I would draw from them is that the group of young Asian scholars is really exceptional. When I say we've done them all across East Asia. We've had sessions in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. And uniformly, we have found that the kind of research that's being done is interesting, it's well-informed, much of it at least deserves publication. The second point, though, is that people across the region struggle with this. And the system that is in operation doesn't really serve young Asian scholars as well as it should. And I wish I had an answer for that. But I would think that one thing that is probably quite important for young Indonesian scholars is that they communicate with young scholars in the rest of Southeast Asia and across East Asia. You'd find that you have a lot in common. And so that I guess is the main point. Maybe one small thing. If you compare the kind of writing that's being done in the West and with the kind of writing that's being done in Asia, a lot of the authors that we met in these workshops across Asia were working on topics with practical implications. It wasn't so much a theoretical contribution, a contribution to the field, as it was real problems that were facing Asian societies. I mean, I'll give you one, it's a bit of an extreme example, but there was a student who was studying in Thailand, but a student from Myanmar, looking at water, wells, and things of that sort, agriculture. And the reason was that his village struggled with this kind of a problem. So he was doing his research with a focus on helping the society that he came from. And I think quite a lot of the research, if you think about it in those terms, quite a lot of the research that we saw had that kind of a feature to it. Now, having said that, maybe I should warn you about one thing, and that is that a lot of articles, especially maybe in Indonesia, ended up with advice to the government. You know, you've studied something, and then here are some suggestions for what ought to be done. That is probably not going to get you published in an international journal. Yes, you should think about those things. You should think about ways to communicate them and to maybe accomplish something. But putting that into an international journal is not the best way to do it. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you again, Paul. It's always so wonderful hearing from you. It is such an insider knowledge of the publishing industry. So I'm sure our audience could ask questions a lot longer, but we really appreciate your time.
Unfortunately, somebody in Japan once said, after I gave a talk there, he said, "You frighten too many people. You make it sound so difficult." And I'm not trying to do that. I really do want to be encouraging. I mean, the work that's being done is good and worthwhile. And it is also, though, difficult to get this published in high-ranking international journals. So I guess what I said before, you look at what audience you're writing for, look for a journal that serves that audience, and your chances will be best that way.
Thank you so much, Paul. And in fact, that is the question that our small group session will be engaging with, is really thinking about what kind of audiences our authors are focusing their work on and seeing if they can work together in helping to hone those ideas in community. So we look forward to the small group sessions, and thank you again, Paul, for your time.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's always fun to do this.
And these workshops are always evolving, and we are excited about bringing in the Indonesian community into some of the more Southeast Asia regional academic writing activities that you might have planned for the future. So I do hope we can build some of that collaboration with many of our participants here as well.